Hello everyone, welcome to UGC NET Political Science classes by Drishti IAS. I am Dr. Ashwati. So students, in this lecture, I will be dealing with a new unit, and that is comparative political analysis, and I will be taking up the approaches section, and I will start with institutional approach followed by systems approach and then political culture approach. Okay. So every year in UGC NET examinations that are held twice a year, we get the questions from this section like the approaches. So we have to be well prepared with this section. Okay. So institutional approach, this is one of the most foremost, or we can say that one of the most earliest one. Okay. So legacy of Greek philosopher Aristotle. Aristotle in his work, he did actually made a comparative analysis of more than 150 constitutions that prevailed here in the Greek city-states, and he actually divided, or we can say that they classified the regimes and the political systems in good and bad forms. Okay, so like it means that he created like a kind of a method like the good form of governments, the bad form of governments, or the perverted categories. Okay, and here also there is a major category is that the rule by one, rule by few, and rule by many. Okay. So, rule by one in the bad form is the tyranny, but then after in the bad form the rule by few is oligarchy, in the bad form the rule by many is democracy. Then after in the good form, rule by one is monarchy, rule by few is aristocracy, and rule by many is polity. Okay, and for him polity is the best one with a mixed constitution. Okay. Now, like you can say that the Greek city-states, as well as the way he actually introduced a comparative method, it was strictly institutional, because the way he has, like, he only looked up to the constitution. Okay. Then after, like in the what we can say that the earlier phase of the modern modern century, we can say that, or the modern period, we have this Machiavelli, concerned with the comparative study of regime times, reappeared in the 15th century with that of Niccolo Machiavelli, and how his work, The Prince, as well as the discourses. As you know that in his Prince, in the last class also I mentioned about it, that in the Prince he talked about a kind of a king that you need, who is changeling, who will be there to confront the fortuna. Fortuna means that the situations that actually can that can put pressure on the king, that like some conditions or some emergencies, how the king has to behave in such conditions. Okay, for that he has given the idea of the king has to be courageous like a lion and cunning like a fox. Why? Because according to him people are corrupted, so you need such a kind of a king to bring a kind of a order in the society. Okay, and that was also the reason why he actually promoted paganism. Then after, but this Prince is for the it's a transition government. Okay, the ultimate idea is to have a republican system. In the discourses he has spoken about that republican system. Okay, now the study of formal institutions of government was the focus of the institutional approach. Like we have the study of legislature, executive, as well as judiciary, like how the very institutional approach means that study of institutions. So this is one of the most traditional approach that we have here. Okay, so style was descriptive rather analytical. It was not actually giving a kind of an idea which one is better or something like that, but rather it was more descriptive. This is like this, this is like this, this is like this, but they are not actually providing with some deep analytical tools. They haven't they haven't developed so far, because with the emergence of the behavioralism, it gave a kind of an impetus that okay, we have to look up to various areas, right? Not just the institutions, but it brought the individual as the unit of analysis, or we can say the people as the unit of analysis. Their behavior, their political behavior, surveys, all these things were brought forth. Okay, now you can understand this, right? So the style was highly descriptive. It was not experimental type, or going for some verification, or let's say that they didn't go for any sort of experimentation. Rather than that, it was just like very descriptive. Okay, and it was not analytical. So the constitutions and formal organizations of government were examined in the legal and historical sense. Mostly, they only looked up to the functioning of the institutions, how these institutions functioned, and the comparative method was not which one is better. Rather than that, it was highly descriptive. Like in the say institution in France is like this, in America it is like this, something like that. Okay. Then after, it was highly culturally strong, like it had a culturally, like it was highly Eurocentric, that we will be explaining later. Study of governments in USA and Europe were the focus point. So you can say it here, focus or analysis was narrow. Okay, the analysis subjects were highly narrow. Ethnocentrism, it means that it only looked up to the Western societies. 5 prominent thinkers are now jointly referred to as the institutionalists. We have James Bryce, Ernest Barker, Harold J. Lasky, Carl Friedrich, and Hermann Feiner. So these people all together are called as the major proponents of institutionalist approach in comparative analysis or comparative political analysis. Okay. So Bryce has written this book. Please note it down. It's very important. The American Commonwealth, published in 1888, and Modern Democracies, published in 1921. It examined the working of the legislatures and their decline. Okay. Then after, we have Harold J. Lasky, who has written the Grammar of Politics also, who was also an ardent supporter of Westminster style of parliamentary democracy. So you can see that they all had an ethnocentric bias. Like during the period, most of the whole world was divided into colonial, like there was a colonial expansion, and many countries in the Europe had their own colonies across the world. That is the reason why Winston Churchill once said that the sun never sets in British Empire. Why? It is because they had colonies right from this, from the Caribbean to that of the Far East. Okay. So then after, we have this Hermann Feiner, who has written this book, Theory and Practice of Modern Government, published in 1932. Then after, Carl Friedrich, he has written this work, Constitutional Government and Democracy, 1932. Ernest Barker concentrated on the relationship between the power and constitutions. So you can see that they were actually looking up to the legal aspects as well as the constitutional aspects of the institutions, how these institutions were functioning in accordance with the constitutions or not, that they actually gave more focus upon. Okay. Now, Ernest Barker has written all these works, A Confederation of the Nations and Powers and Constitution, published in 1918, Essays on Government, 1945, Ideas and Ideals of the British Empire, 1941. So you have got a kind of a good idea about this. Okay. Now moving next. So institutional approach was highly speculative. Speculation, like we can say that it had the normative tendencies. It was speaking about what ought to be or what it should be like. Such things were there. Okay. As largely prescriptive and normative, I've already they were giving prescriptions like advices. Okay, you can do this so that you can increase the efficiency of the institutions, or the better functioning of institutions can be done by following A, B, C, D. Okay, like that. Then after, concerned only with the irregularities and regularities without looking for the relationships. So they were studying about 2 constitutions, and they were checking upon what are the regularities and irregularities, but they were not looking up to the relationship between both. Okay. And then after, configurative and non-comparative, focusing as it did not on individual countries. Okay, they were just looking up to let's say France, UK, or some the study on USA or something like that. But they were not looking up to the relation. In order to have a real comparative method, you should be capable of comparing with other countries, right? With other countries, how it is functioning there, how it is functioning. There are different ways how you can actually study about it. Now, in terms of nationalism, you have this primordial identities, are there primordial theories are there, you have instrumentalist theories, and they have developed in accordance with different conditions, different spatial settings. They have given a kind of a analysis about such countries. Okay. Now, Unlike this institutional approach, they actually focused only on individual countries, especially they had this bias also, like let's say that European as well as they focused only on USA. Okay. So Royce Macrodis, one of the most prominent thinker who has given an idea about the institutional approach, how it actually functions, and its principal characteristics was enumerated by Royce Macrodis. Okay, the study of comparative government published in 1955. Okay, so he actually gave these 4 features about the traditional approach here. One is non-comparative approach, descriptive and formal approach, parochial approach, and static approach. Okay. Now, next one, systems theory. Systems theory emerged as part of the rising, or we can say that the influences of the behavioralism. Everything need to be experimented and you have to come with the generalization through proper verification. Okay. You have to go through, you have to quantify things. The David Easton's 8 points are there, like how you have to come up with all these, behaviorals actually focus more on the behavior of the states, behavior of the individual people. They brought people as the unit of analysis. Okay, so the systems approach. So historically speaking, systems analysis emerged in the field of social anthropology in the writings of Radcliffe Brown and B. Malinowski. Okay, so these two people actually introduced the systems approach in the social anthropology field. Then after followed by developed in the field of sociology by Talcott Parsons. Then after Robert Merton and Marion Levy. After that we have David Easton, who has given like the idea about that how the systems approach vis-a-vis how it emerged in the behavioral as an influence from the behavioral revolution. Okay, a framework for political analysis or systems analysis of political life, 1965. David Easton defined politics as the authoritative allocation of values. The model of political system has also served as the basis for Gabriel Allman's model of structural functional analysis, as also for Carl Dusch's model of communications theory. Okay. Now, before I go for the Allman and Powell's model, so how the system actually worked. Okay. So here you can see that here we make the demands. Okay, demands we make through in the form of inputs. Then after it goes through the political process. Okay, all the mechanism how the decision making, policy making takes place here. And in the terms of policies, okay, let's say that in the form of policies you get the output. Okay, but from here it again goes to the feedback. Okay, so you have this feedback mechanism here. Okay, so it's possible that whatsoever policies has been made, there may be like the policy is made for 100 people, it may be suitable for like let's say the 60 people, but 40 people still have some other issues. So then after in the form of these policies, it actually again goes into this system as inputs like in the form of demands. Okay, so again it gets processed here. So this is a kind of a system that he has like developed, like okay, you have to the political system functions like this. This is the place where the process happens. Okay, so now Gabriel Allman and G.B. Powell in their comparative politics or developmental approach actually developed, like they further developed these input functions. Okay, in the form of like this, the input functions. Earlier you had only one input function right there, but they elaborated the input function here. So now you have here political socialization and recruitment, interest articulation, interest aggregation, and political communication. These are actually the input functions. Okay. After that, you have these output functions, rule making, rule application, rule adjudication. When we talk about rule making, it is the legislature. Rule application, you have this executive. Rule adjudication, it's the judiciary. Okay. Now, Powell mentioned specific capabilities of the political system that I have enumerated here, and this question was asked in UGC NET examination some 3 to 4 years back. Okay. So, political system is extractive, regulative, distributive, it is symbolic, it is responsive, domestic and international capability. Okay. So, you can see that extractive in terms of the resources, it is regulative, yes, it regulates the policies, actually how they regulate things in the society. Okay, then after it is distributive, distribution of resources which are required to in accordance with the needs. Then after it is symbolic also, they are the symbolic gesture of the political system, responsive to the needs. Then after domestic and international capability, like how they actually make a kind of an exposure also. Okay, so these are the 6 capabilities of the political system enumerated by Almond and Powell. Very important one, students. Okay. Now, this is a question, which among the following is not included in classification of interest groups given by Gabriel Almond? Okay. The answer is A, non-institutional interest groups. Actually, he spoke about institutional interest groups, non-association interest groups, then after anomic association interest groups. Okay. So, now your answer is A. Then after we have this communications theory given by Carl Dush. So, Carl Dush, his principal work is The Nerves of Government, Models of Political Communication and Control, published in 1963, and is the chief exponent of this approach. He particularly introduced the techniques of cybernetics, okay, the network, to the sphere of political analysis, and he emphasized on the importance or the significance of media, how the information is channelized. Okay, that is more important. Communication is very important. Like, let's say that if you are given some wrong information, then what will happen? We will develop a kind of a narrative that may actually prove to be very wrong. As you know that these days we say that, okay, don't watch too much programs which actually gives you negative like, you know, they build up some negative narrative, etc. So this is all about like Aldous theory of communication. Communication plays a very important role in forming the policies and many other things. Okay. Now this is a match list 1 with that of list 2. So we have here David Easton. He called his political system, that process, as a black box. Okay. David Easton with that, or I will just put it like this here. A black box. Okay. Lucian Pye, he is associated with the development syndrome. Then after you have Samuel P. Huntington, waves of democratization. So we have here C. Then after we have this Seymour Martin Lipset gave the idea of political man. Okay. So it is with D. Okay. And the most important thing is here that we have to understand that Samuel P. Huntington, he actually in his waves of democratization, like his idea was that the first wave was the slow wave of the 19th century. Second wave happened actually after the World War II, and the third wave actually emerged after 1970s, where we have seen the democratization in Southern Europe followed by Latin America and Asia. Okay. Now, next, according to Gabriel Almond, comparatively homogeneous culture is found in which type of countries? Okay, it is developed countries. Okay. And with that, he also mentioned about like homogeneous culture. He has actually like given this idea for the Anglo-American political system. Okay. Anglo-American political system. Then he spoke about the continental Europe political system. Then you have developing countries. Then he mentioned about the totalitarian ones. Political system. So for the totalitarian political system, he mentioned about the USSR, China. For the developing countries, the ex, or let's say that post-colonial countries. Continental Europe system that he has mentioned is about the Italy, France, Norway. Okay. An Anglo-American system that he was actually focusing towards the United States of America. And continental Europe system, he has defined it as the fragmented political system. Then we have this developing countries political system. They are actually the post-colonial countries, and followed by the totalitarian political system, USSR and China. Okay. Now, the third one, that is political culture. Okay. Now, it emerged in the 1960s, related to the nations or national cultures. So, consisted of beliefs, symbols and values that define the situations in which political action occurs. So, like, so what is like a kind of it was actually emerged out of the behavioral ideas itself, like how do we actually respond towards the cultural norms, the symbols, as well as that what sort of political culture we have. Okay, whether it is like a parochial one, whether it is a participant or the subject culture that we have like mentioned here. Okay, whether we are actually interested in the working of the political institutions or not, whether we are looking up to that. Maybe we are just only participating in the elections, but we are not very concerned. The third one is that where the people are not just participating in elections, but they are actually putting demands through various interest groups and pressure groups as well. Okay, so these are the three types of political culture. The idea given by Gabriel Almond and Sidney Verba in their work called the civic culture. Okay, so civic culture. So civic culture is published in 1963. Okay, so they surveyed the attitudes of citizens toward their nation in the USA, Great Britain, Germany, France, Italy, and Mexico. I remember in one of the previous UGC NET examination, they did ask about that. The Sidney Verba's and as well as this Almond and Sidney Verba's civic culture has focused on which among the following countries. Okay, so you have USA, Great Britain, Germany, France, Italy, and Mexico. Okay. Next, Almond and Verba have identified 5 important dimensions of political cultures, namely a sense of national identity, attitudes towards oneself as a participant in political life, attitude towards one's fellow citizens, attitudes and expectations regarding the governmental output and performance, attitudes towards knowledge about the political process of decision making. So you can understand it here that how we have like we have a sense of national identity, the country where we are living, okay, the political community of which we are a member. Then after attitude towards like how we are a participant in the political life, everyday political life, how the policies affect our life and how we are going to react towards it. Our own fellow citizens, like whatever happens to me, I'm not being individualistic, but rather than that, whatever things I am doing, it may have an impact upon others as well. Okay, so that we have a kind of a sense here. Then after attitudes and expectation regarding governmental output, we are looking up to the government's decisions, policies, as well as like any legislation which is being there. So people actually here, the civil society is very strong in the countries where you have a very strong political culture. Okay, then after knowledge about the political process of decision making, who makes the decision, how they are making the decision, how particular persons can actually impact upon our decisions, or sorry, our the public policies and many other things, and how it is going to impact our life, like economy, our like freedoms and many other things. Okay. Then after we have SC Finance, The Man on Horseback is also very important book with reference to the political culture. Then this Finer identified about the like this types of political culture, 4 types of political culture. You can actually see it here. Mature political culture you can see in England and USA. Developed political culture you can see we have witnessed during the Germany during the empire period to that of the Hitler, Japan between the 2 world wars. Then low political culture you can see in Egypt, Spain and Syria. Then after minimal political culture you can find in Mexico and Congo. Okay, but you have to be very careful that he wrote his work in 1960s. Okay. Now Lucien Pai, he has also given an idea about non-Western societies. If you remember, like when you must have studied about your public administration, Fredericks, you must have read about the ecological approach. After this wave of behavioralism, people started looking up to the non-Western societies as well. Especially Lucien Pai is a very important person in this respect, that he has given an idea about, like he looked for towards the non-Western societies, how they perform. Okay. So he has looked up to their the issues of equality, differentiation, capabilities, and many areas he looked up to. He actually gave a kind of an analysis about the non-Western societies. Okay. So for him, traditional societies with a low degree of functional differentiation. So this is a kind of an idea he has given about the non-Western societies, that functionally differentiation, there is a low degree of functional differentiation. Most of the times in traditional societies you have a kind of a system where most of the traditional setup, the relations as well as the politics is highly defined by the ethnic linkages, or the kinship factors are more important there. Okay. Lack of proper communication between the institutions, the people are also like, you know, more like it is like a kind of a few society of the few society of Fredericks also. Like we can say here, people are actually not highly, it's very agraria, it's very agraria based. People are not having the proper communication about who is actually making the laws, what such laws are going to be, like how they are going to impact upon the life of the common man. The rate of recruitment in these societies is high. Then of the bureaucratic thing. Okay. The charismatic personality of leaders, like certain leaders actually emerge as so charismatic that people actually follow them blindly. Okay. Then after, grave economic disparities, it means that haves and have not, the gap between the haves are like, you know, they are controlled. They may be the 20% of that country, the haves or the rich people, but they are controlling the 80% of the country's economy. Okay. So these are the ideas given by Lucien Pai. So according to Powell, any nation's political culture may be mapped at 3 levels. Okay, what are these 3 levels in accordance? Okay, so the political system level, the process level, the policy level. Okay, so the answer is 3, C. Okay, process level, the policy level. Okay. So students, that's all in today's class. Students, go through my lecture again, make notes appropriately, and then after, like, you know, these are all the necessary things that you have to keep it in mind while studying comparative political analysis for the UGC NET examinations. Every year you get 1 or 2 questions at least from this area. Okay. So comparative political analysis approaches, at least 1 or 2 questions you may find from this area. Okay. And in the next class, I'll be covering other approaches of comparative political analysis. Thank you for watching my video. See you in another video. Bye.